When I think of a veteran of the Civil War, I think of a brother fighting a brother. When I think of a veteran of World War II, I think of that generation as being the greatest generation. They did war to save democracy for the world and all of the other wars combined. Yeah, that was a hell of a generation. They were the real war heroes. When I think of a veteran of the Iran-Iraq wars, I think of a misguided soldier who was duped in the fighting for the military-industrial complex. When I think of a veteran of the Vietnam War, I think of a social outcast, rejected by society, erroneously labeled as a baby killer, unappreciated. Join the Army, see the world. Through the sights of a gun. My name is Alexander William Kosatschkow. I enlisted in the United States Army as the captain of a patrol boat. The reason I was in Vietnam was because it was the only job in town. I was a young guy out of high school dropout as a matter of fact, and no one was hiring high school dropouts. I was 17 years of age. I was in downtown Patterson one day, and there's my buddy Peter Cedar standing by the bus station. And he's got these folders under his arm. I says, "What's with the folders?" He says, "I'm enlisting." I said, "Enlisting in the Army?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm gonna go airborne." He says to me, "Why don't you go down with me?" He says, "We'll enlist under the buddy plan." He says, "That way we stay together in all our duty stations." I said, "Well, hell, I got nothing better to do. Why not?" So I went down, signed up. I did my 4 years. Pete did his 5 years. And that's how I ended up in sunny Vietnam. Well, when I enlisted in the service, I felt pretty good about it. You know, it was going to get me out of Patterson, New Jersey. It was going to give me an opportunity to see the world. The way I found out I was going was I got called down to this company commander's office. It was another outfit in the brigade. And it was me and my buddy Eugene Zayurko, who was a Russian immigrant. He enlisted. And we reported to the old man as ordered, and the CEO looks at me and he says, "I can't tell you where we're going, that's classified." He says, "But I went through your 201 files, those are our personal records." And he looks at me and he says, "You can speak Chinese." I says, "No, I think you got me confused with my buddy Eugene." Eugene spoke 7 different languages fluently. Chinese was one of them. So I figured, oh hell, we're going to China. He says, "Well, then you're the guy that's qualified on the M60 machine gun." And he expected me to train his guys on the M60 machine gun before we went over. So I figured, well, we're drafted, you know. A couple days later, I found myself in the supply line. We're drilling our jungle fatigues. And they give you a booklet on how to speak Vietnamese in 10 easy lessons, like some of the more common phrases. We're standing in a line waiting to draw our fatigues when the old man approaches us and he says, "Sorry, but you 2 guys can't go. You have to leave me behind." I said, "Really? Why is that?" He says, "Well, you're not citizens." At that time, non-combatants had to be United States citizens. And neither me or Eugene has gotten our naturalization. So they pulled us out of line. Well, within a year, they sent my regular company over. There were about 10 of us. Detachment of us. And Saigon was not considered a combatant area, so a non-citizen could go. And that's how I found myself in sunny Vietnam. There's no way that my mother was going to stop me from enlisting. I had to get her signature because I was only 17 at the time. I think it took me about a month of hounding her. I guess she realized when I turned 18 she couldn't stop me anyway, but no way she wanted me to enlist. Day in basic training, it was real hell. I think it was the most miserable 8 weeks of my life. Constant harassment, constant chicken shit. There was one time we did a force march out to the rifle range to qualify. It was a 20-mile force march through sand. I don't know how the hell Fort Dix got all that sand on it. They must have trucked it in. But it was hotter than hell. We were forced to march with empty canteens. Couldn't take a drink. And then we fired on the range, qualified. At the end of the day, we were forced marched into a bivouac area where they had dinner waiting. I was walking through the chow line with my mess kit, and the sergeant said, "Everybody on your bellies." They made us do a roll crawl through the chow line, which is pretty humiliating. And then my DI put his foot on my back and pressed me to the ground and I said, "Roll crawl, boy." And at that point, that was the crucial turning point in basic. If I ever was going to kill somebody and go on trial for insubordination, that would have been it. And I thought, well, if I can get through this one incident, I can get through anything. So I just let it slide. Basic did absolutely nothing to prepare us, and neither did AIT, Advanced Infantry Training. You learn everything as you go. It's more or less an on-the-job training type of deal. You're a newbie, totally clueless, totally unprepared. You try to learn enough to survive. Hopefully somebody takes you under the wing. The war impacted my family. It especially affected my mother. I know they took me up to Port Authority to catch the bus back to base just prior to my shipping out. And, she was quite shook up about it. I remember getting on the bus and this guy sitting next to me says, "Geez, your mother seems awfully concerned." I says, "Yeah, you'd think I was going off to war or something." One of her last words to me were probably to write often. I had a good buddy of mine, Jerry Hunt. He was absolutely insane over the fact that he was going to be shipped to Vietnam. What Jerry was doing was he was buying insurance. We had these insurance agents that used to come from off post, and they would sell you combat insurance. Now, I haven't really given it much thought, but he was buying an awful lot of insurance. And then one day, the company commander takes us out for a organized athletic. We went down to Virginia Beach for a swim. He jumped into the Chesapeake Bay, and he started to swim for home. A lifeguard went out after him, told him to come in, and he said that he would. The lifeguard came in, Jerry kept going west, and he drowned himself. It was the fear of going to kill him. Had he gone, he probably would have gotten through it without a scratch. My anticipations of the war were I would be stationed in Saigon on a 60-ton floating crane. These cranes had quarters on them. I figured life would be good. They're usually air-conditioned. You do your 8 or 12-hour day, and that's that. It didn't work out like that. When we got over there, the crane wasn't there. It wasn't like that at all. We landed at Tonson Wood Air Base. We got off of the plane. The first thing I seen was a little Vietnamese kid sitting there selling Coca-Cola by the bottle. I think, well, this isn't going to be much different than, It was a little warm. The heat and humidity were absolutely oppressive. It just was what it was. We were over on verbal orders from the commanding officer, no written orders, and the new CO that we reported to didn't know what the hell to do with us. So we found our own jobs. I went out and I found a pickup boat, a patrol boat. I was a deck ape on that for a few months. And, along with my buddy Eugene Zierko, we found another pickup boat, Q651. That was a 65-foot patrol boat. Within 3 months, I was skippering the thing. I lost all of my American crew. They had reassigned them. And they assigned me a Vietnamese crew, a Vietnamese engineer, and a Vietnamese deck crew. The engineer was outstanding. Never had a day's downtime. And they were pleasant enough to work with, The only problem I had with them on the lunch breaks, they used to like to smoke an opium pipe. Which I didn't do drugs. I didn't appreciate them doing the drugs. But I figured, what the hell, as long as they could do their jobs, it's their culture. I let it slide. It's a beautiful country, that's for sure. Tropical environment. The heat was a little oppressive. Could understand the heat and humidity. That was pretty good duty. I was close with several people. Like I said, the fellow I went over with, Eugene Zayurko, Russian kid, had a very strong Russian accent. He was a real joker. He was a Philadelphia boy. And I always regret never having stayed in touch with him. I would have liked to maintain ties with him. You cover each other's backs. You look out for your buddies look out for you. And that's about all you can hope for. Any downtime that I had during my tour, I would spend in Saigon. Usually up on Tudo Street at the Blue Moon Cafe in the company of a young lady named Sally. We did a lot of drinking. What are you gonna do? You're in the Army, you're committed to 4 years, you follow orders. And you usually had to drink your beers warm. I'm appreciative of having been able to have that experience. It wasn't all bad. During my service, the weather in Vietnam was hotter than hell. Heat and humidity, except during the monsoon season, when it rained 24/7. And the temperature probably didn't drop below 70, but it was enough of a variation to where you actually froze. You were cold, you had to sleep with a blanket. I'd like to see Saigon again. I know they named it Ho Chi Minh City. Since, as far as I'm concerned, it'll always be Saigon. At that time, it was referred to as the Pearl of the Orient, or Sin City. There wasn't anything that you couldn't get or do in Saigon. It was just, it was different. The Vietnamese people on the whole were rather gentle people, short of stature. I didn't perceive them as a threat at all. The common Vietnamese person, like I said, they just wanted to live and let live. Vietnamese people were victims of the war, as far as I'm concerned. They would catch it from both sides. They caught it from the Viet Cong and they caught it from the American forces. They were stuck in the middle. The average Vietnamese farmer just wants to farm his land and be left the hell alone. I would say they were very apolitical. They had no politics. Their politics was their politics. They just survived, growing a crop, raising their families. I would say our theme song, the #1 song while we were there, was "We Gotta Get Out of This Place." If you have to ask why, well, you never did a tour of the Mom. Armed Forces Radio and Television Service. They used to play all of the hot rock and roll tunes at that time. They would broadcast over the radio. I'd pick them up on my RDF, my radio direction finder. Used to listen to Don Amici a lot at night too. There's probably not a lot of people alive today who've even heard his name. But yeah, and they eventually got television. They would broadcast Batman every night in the company area. It was really hilarious. They took a television and they put it right in the presidential square in Saigon, on a big podium. And every night you could see hundreds of Vietnamese crowded around this. They had never seen television before, And to see Batman, wow, that was a real treat. Well, the reminders of home, definitely Playboy, I think the Vietnamese men liked Playboy magazine more than the GIs who were over there. They liked well-rounded, well-stacked American women because they had none of their own. So I miss my mother's cooking. Like I say, I skipped the patrol boat. We had a cost of living allowance that we were given above and beyond our regular pay and our combat pay. And I was pretty much responsible for shopping and feeding myself. So I had to cook for myself for an entire year. I definitely miss Mom's cooking. I lost my engineer over there, Max, one of the best goddamn Army engineers going. We went into town one night. There was a ferry landing that we would drop the guys off when we wanted to go to Saigon, hit the bars. And he came back one night on another guy's boat, drunk as the Lord, wasn't wearing a life jacket, and his luck would have it he fell overboard. Well, the river in Saigon has an 11-foot tide. Not even an Olympic-class swimmer can swim against that. He just went overboard, drowned. 3 days later, there was one spot in the river where the bodies usually washed up because of the currents, and the bodies would fill with gas, float to the surface, and 3 days later we went and pulled them out. I never had a day's downtime on that patrol boat when Max was in the engine room. Totally senseless. It never should have happened. Well, the one thing that really concerned me was when the VC mined the Baton Rouge Victory. The Baton Rouge Victory was a merchant ship, and she had made something like 6 trips up the river carrying ammo supplies. On the 7th trip, I guess Charlie wasn't aware of it, they were carrying beer. Maybe he didn't want us to have our beer. And one of the Viet Cong Navy SEALs, they had Navy SEALs just like we did, managed to attach a lippet mine to the side of the Baton Rouge Victory. And it blew a hole in her. They had a 15-foot prefabricated patch on board. It didn't fit. That hole was bigger than 15 feet. They killed 5 of the crew in the engine room. And when they set it off at a very strategic part of the river. It was the narrowest part of the river, very narrow channel. And had the Baton Rouge Victory gone down in that narrow channel, it would have blocked all shipping into the country. We wouldn't have been able to get any supplies by ship. Fortunately, the skipper had enough sense to keep up his speed and run to the shore. He got it out of the main channel. But that was a concern to me because it was a sure sign that a major offensive was about to begin. Arriving in country, that was your first and biggest mistake. You definitely have a different attitude over there. You go into the survival mode. You can't walk around with your head up your butt. You know, even when you're in the city of Saigon. One of the first things that they told us when we arrived in country was to stay out of crowds and one round would get you off. And I never forgot that. Command structure forgot about it. They decided they were going to have a parade one day in Saigon, and sure enough, Charlie rolled out a recoilless rifle and he fired into the reviewing stand. So they didn't take their own advice of staying out of crowds and went around to get you all. The adrenaline rush from being fired upon that's the greatest high in the world. I don't think any drug can match that, as long as you're not actually being hit. I got a call from the company area one time. We had a bunch of boats docked up there, and they were drawing fire from the other side of the river. So we skedaddled up there, and sure enough, you could see muzzle flashes out in the bush. I got so goddamn excited. We were running river patrol with MPs at that time. And I wanted to man my M60, and I'm yelling at this MP to take the wheel so I can man the machine gun. And he's yelling back, he's not qualified. So I was a little torn between taking the wheel and manning the M60. The only thing that came out of that, there was a boat that came out of the swamp in the sampan. Like its tail was on fire. And I thought about sinking him, but I put the floodlight on him, and he had absolutely no cargo, he had absolutely no weaponry in that boat. So I just let it go. The first time I drew fire, I was absolutely elated. I couldn't believe the rush. I don't know, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm fucked up. But that's how it affected me. It is absolutely the greatest high in the world. Would you like me to shoot at you? So you can experience it. All movies that I've seen that portrayed the Vietnam War, I believe, are not totally accurate. They take a lot of artistic license. But that's what sells tickets, isn't it? I couldn't comment on it. That was another war. Those guys were the grunts. They were out in the Toolies and the boonies fighting the war. And, you know, I was mainly on the river, patrolling the river. I guess I had been in country for maybe 3 or 4 months, and I get a call from the harbor master. He wants me to report to his office. He said to me, well, you hadn't written your mother, and the Red Cross contacted me. It seems that your mother's concerned about not getting any letters from you. I said, well, sir, haven't you heard? There's a war going on. I have better things to do. So at that point, he pulled out his .45. He laid it down on the desk, handed me a pen and paper. He says, write it right now or I'll shoot you. When my feet retouched American soil, I felt absolutely exhilarated. I almost got down and kissed the ground. Wasn't discharged. I still had a couple of months of active duty to do. It was probably the toughest couple of months that I was served in the stateside army because it was different. Big difference between being in a peacetime unit and being in a combat zone. I just couldn't put up with the chicken shit anymore. Having to make formation every morning, having to take PT, physical training. We didn't do any of that over there. I was pretty much on my own. The only time I ever reported back to the company unit was to collect my pay. You find yourself on a Freedom Bird on Friday, leaving the country. 2 days later, you're stateside, you're out in the streets, in the civilian world. Absolutely no debriefing at all. In December of 1966, got on a Greyhound bus to the airport and went right to my mother's house in Patterson, New Jersey, unannounced. Knocked on the door. She answered. She was quite surprised. And being that it was the middle of the winter, I can say I had the best tan in New Jersey. The first words were, Alex. Alex is home, with her German accent. She wasn't expecting me. Like I said, I arrived unannounced. After being properly greeted with my family, I went into my duffel bag. I got out a 50 Chevys Regal, and I finished it. I think it took me 2 days to sleep that one off. Well, when I got back, I figured I wouldn't have any problem finding a job anywhere. You know. It turned out that they weren't, before the war, they weren't hiring high school dropouts. When I got back from the war, they weren't hiring baby killers. So, either way, you were out of luck. You didn't let people know you were a Vietnam vet. You know, if you came up during the job interview, you know, an awful lot of employers lost employees because of the draft. They were reluctant to hire you because they'd have to train you. And hell, a year down the road, you could be drafted, so you lose an employee that they sunk a lot of money into. I don't have any contact with any of the guys that I knew, regretfully. A bunch of great guys. I went to a few American Legion meetings, VFW meetings, and got bored of them real quick because it seems to me that all those guys can do is bellyache about the benefits and how they need more benefits and improve medical and whatnot. And I didn't feel any camaraderie with them at all, so I just don't have anything to do with those organizations. Well, the VA is a fiasco. Walter Reed, that was a real embarrassment. The place was totally dilapidated. You had vets in rooms that weren't fit for human habitation. But you're going to get that anytime you have an underfunded, overburdened system, I think. The greatest skill that I obtained from my tour of duty in Vietnam was perseverance, patience. I just learned to let shit roll off of my back. Well, I haven't done my tour, met my obligation. Even though I wasn't a civilian at the time, I felt that I owed the country something because it did allow my family to immigrate, it did educate me. But, I would recommend it to any young man, providing it's a just, honorable, and legal war. That hasn't been the case of late. As a matter of fact, I counseled my son when he turned 18 to not register for the draft. During my tour, if I could have talked directly to the president, I would have said, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? It wasn't until I was in my 40s that I started to question the war, and some of the truth and the falsehood of the entire thing came out. Today, anybody can Google and do an internet search. We didn't have those tools back then. The only thing you had to rely upon was the propaganda machine. As far as we were concerned, we were there to stop communism before it landed on the shores of California. Of course, that's pure hokum. We know that today. I believe that the Gulf of Tonkin was a setup to draw us into the war. Come on, the Vietnamese, Viet Cong sampan attacks a Navy battleship. What are you kidding? Turned out it never even happened. But the Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin resolution based on a lie, and the war just escalated. The country is run by a military-industrial complex, an oligarchy of a handful of corporations, mostly in the weapons and the banking industry. They profit from that war, just like they profit from the war in the Middle East. It's all about profit. It's got nothing to do with lost lives. Hell, we lost 55,000 of our youngest and brightest kids. They lost just as many in Korea. Another fiasco. What has that gotten us? I think the motive is profit and perpetual war. I'd like to know what happened if one of these days we just didn't show up for the wars. You just don't go. Let them throw a war and nobody shows up. Now, if the United States were ever invaded, that's another story. I would arm myself and I would arm my children and grandchildren and expect them to fight. But that's a whole nother ballgame. A tyrannical government turning on the people of the United States. I think it's incumbent for all veterans to arm themselves against a tyrannical government. As far as I was concerned, I knew there was no way that we could possibly win because of the way the war was conducted. If we had conducted that war like World War II was conducted, it would have been over within a year. But no, the corporations like Bell Helicopter and Armalite, they were in it for the money. And, had it not been for the protesters and the eventual outrage against an immoral, illegal, and unjust war, it will probably still be going on today because there's money in it. I don't care what people's opinions are. No skin off of my nose. I don't have any animosity towards the peaceniks, like the guys that went to Canada. I may have well done the same thing. So I hold no animosity towards those guys. As a matter of fact, they probably hope to shorten the war. Someone calling me a baby killer? No, I never got into any altercations over that. And I hear stories of it happening to other guys. But I can tell you if it ever happened to me or my brother Vic, it would have been a battle. I would have ripped off their heads and shit down their head, down their throat. Baby killer accusation really pisses me off. I've never heard of anyone that has done that, and I don't believe it. I believe it's just a bunch of left-wing media propaganda. There were no GIs that I knew of that ever kill a baby. As a matter of fact, most of them gave from their pay every month to the local orphanages. Well, if you're against the war, I'd say you're entitled to your opinion, aren't you? I mean, we do have the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. And like I say, I hold no animosity to the war protesters, the guys who went to Canada. I probably owe them a favor. The country owes them a favor because they helped shorten the war. And we I say, it was an illegal, unjust, unreconcilable war. That's all it's to it. Well, when I was 17, JFK came to Patterson. They let us out of school for the day to watch his speech. It really impressed me. And if I were old enough to vote, I would have voted for him. I did have the dubious distinction of burying him, because when they shot him, I was already a member of the 3rd Herd, the Honor Guard, stationed in Washington, D.C. And I took part in that funeral. That was something I'll never forget. When I completed my service with the United States Army, I had 4 years of active duty. You actually have a 6-year obligation. I was in the active reserve for an additional 2 years. I could have been called up at any time. These poor slobs today, they're in reserve units and they think they're going to do nothing but good for their state in case of a state emergency or something like that. They end up being activated for an indeterminate period of time. Some of these poor slobs over there are on their 4th and 5th tour of duty. I feel for those guys. They join a National Guard or a reserve unit with every good intention of helping the citizens of the state, and they end up fighting a perpetual war. I don't think it's fair to them. There's no predetermined tour of duty for those guys. And it costs them their jobs. I mean, under the Soldiers and Sailors Relief Act, the employers are supposed to save your jobs. Question, if you're in the Middle East for 4 or 5 years, guess what? Your job is taken. You have families at home, financial hardships. I'd say those guys have got it pretty tough today. I wouldn't want to do what they're doing. One thing I'd like to pass on to my family from my experience, and I try to pass it along to my son. I mean, he was at draft age. This is not the country that it used to be. You don't go to war for reasons that we used to go to war for. It's political, economic. It's all about the industrial military complex. President Eisenhower tried to warn us about that, and most people didn't heed the warning. Definitely not the country that it used to be. And I would say that nowadays, the present political, economic climate, you got to put yourself before your country, at least before the people that are running this country and the way that they're running things. I'm glad I made her home alive, and if I had it to do over, I'd do it again.